Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I
It's
have
really
no
weird.
idea what...
Yeah, that was really
Yeah,
weird. It didn't work at all.
I don't know what that was.
Okay, well, let me title this.
Okay, will it show up?
Hopefully everybody comes back in. I told them that we were heading out. They said that they could hear us, but that obviously we couldn't hear each other.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the heck was happening.
Yep, that's kind of weird. Okay, we're just setting up real quick here again. So, yeah, go ahead and give us an intro, Spencer.
Okay, so for anyone listening, welcome. This is the Wake Up America podcast. And we are a conservative talk show, and we love everyone adding comments. We think that the format that Stereo offers is really what helps us have a profitable discussion, but just remember to keep them clean and on topic. And that's really all we ask for your comments. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our topic for today, which is the BLM quote-unquote martyrs. These people are the separate cases that one way or another either started or helped fuel the BLM riots over the summer. And we're going to go through a couple of those cases specifically and see whether one, the actions of the officers in these instances were justified. Two, whether the actions of the specific people that the police were interacting with were justified, and whether the riots and the protests that came from these instances were also justified.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, starting with open comments. So please leave comments, talk, snide comments, anger, agreements. I don't care what it is. Just leave us and talk to us, guys. We're having a conversation here. Before we had technical difficulties with the last scheduled episode just a few minutes ago, I had started talking about Breonna Taylor. And I mentioned her first because she has the most evidence to her case. Followed secondly by Jacob Blake, and then talking about George Floyd. There's a lot of controversy around him. But Breonna Taylor is a very simple example, and it really comes down to a basic misunderstanding. So yep. I'll just go ahead and run through the timeline so everyone understands what really happened there. The police showed up at Breonna Taylor's apartment, which was in the name of her boyfriend, okay? And her boyfriend had a past with drugs, and the police were performing it was several different raids across the same town. I don't remember where they lived exactly. I think it was New Orleans, but I'm not positive. They performed raids across the city on different places that have been registered to Breonna's boyfriend's name. While they were performing the raids, one of them they went to was Breonna Taylor's, where she was actually at with her boyfriend that night. They did not know that anyone was here, but they had signs of life, and so they indicated their arrival to the apartment by knocking on the door 7 times. No, sorry, I think it was 3 times actually. They knocked repeatedly, announcing their presence at the door and asking to come in. In reality, the cops did not have to do that because since they were searching for drugs, they had a warrant to enter the building without reason. They didn't have to, announce their presence, but they decided to anyway. So they announced their presence and said, we're here, let us in. Knock, 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 knock. Nobody answered the door. So then they busted the door open. On the other side of the door, while the police were knocking, the boyfriend never heard anything. It said that they were curled up watching TV. What did you say, Spencer?
I said supposedly.
Yeah, supposedly. The boyfriend supposedly never heard anything. They were curled up in their bedroom watching TV, or whatever it was, but they were just being passive. They weren't doing anything or anything like that. So the boyfriend claims he never heard anything. After the police entered the apartment, because they banged the door open real hard and forced their way in, which they were warranted to do. The boyfriend, I don't remember his name off the top of my head. What was it?
It was Kenneth Walker.
Thank you. Yes, Kenneth Walker. He pulled a gun out and shot at, because he did not know they were cops, and he shot at one of the cops. The bullet did hit a cop. I think there were three that were the people that were the cops that were involved in it. It hit one of the cops, and one of the officers dragged the injured officer out, and another returned fire. I don't remember how many times he fired exactly, but to me it's irrelevant. Fired repeatedly in the direction of Kenneth Walker, who had just fired a shot at the cops.
Yeah. So this case, the police came because the address was registered and listed as Kenneth Walker living there, or being there, whatever word you want to use. And so they came for him, not for Breonna Taylor, right? She was basically in this situation, she was not being considered, although there were some things that in the past might have been concerning for the police. They were not after her specifically. And she was definitely not asleep, right? As Colton was just telling, she was not asleep. And at the time that the shooting started happening, they were not in bed either. She and the boyfriend were in the hallway. And so,
yes.
The myth that she was just, peacefully sleeping, got shot and killed, is a straight up lie. She was not asleep. The boyfriend was a known drug dealer. Now,
yes.
The warrant they had. Go ahead.
I misspoke earlier. I said that the apartment that Breonna and her boyfriend were living in belonged to him. I remember correctly now. The apartment belonged to Breonna, but his car, which had been observed visiting all his other apartments, was also observed going to her apartment, and so that's why they decided to raid that apartment too. Sorry, go ahead, Spencer.
You're good. And so he was known to be related with drugs. They don't know if we don't know if he had drugs in the house at the time. But he already had a criminal past in terms of what the police were expecting and thinking about. They knew that, okay, this guy has had dealings with drugs in the past, so they didn't just go expecting, to find a completely innocent guy who was willing to do whatever. And the boyfriend did open fire first. That is essentially indisputable. He opened fire first, and the police sent return fire back at him.
Yeah. The return fire missed Kenneth Walker and killed Breonna Taylor. So in the end, it came down to a misunderstanding about whether, well, actually, I guess it's not really as much a misunderstanding as it is a mystery, whether or not Kenneth Walker actually heard the cops knocking at the door and decided to ignore them. There was a rumor that going around, or I guess more of a theory, that they were laying together in bed, watching TV or whatever it may be. And then they had started walking down the hallway after hearing people knocking at the door. But since they have no way to see inside the apartment before the police entered, it is just that is a theory. It's the most sound theory. I think it's the most believed, but it's not entirely certain which one is it, exactly what happened, because there's no way to find out exactly what happened, since Kenneth has not been truthful and obviously has a known criminal past, so he cannot entirely be trusted. Because he was a drug dealer and he was dating Breonna Taylor, and his car was observed going to her apartment, then Breonna Taylor's apartment was then raided in an attempt to seize all of this man's drugs and to hopefully arrest him. So in the end, the fault of Breonna Taylor did not fall to racial prejudice or systemic racism or any crap like that. What fell to was the boyfriend being a criminal and his girlfriend paying the price. Not to mention he shot at cops. So, I mean, if he was expecting them to just give a warm hug in return and say, it's okay, I know you shot at me, and injured one of my friends, I don't think that was his intention. He meant not to be captured.
Right. And this is the argument. Officer, why couldn't you have just shot him in the leg? You can't see your attacker and he's actively firing at you, then you have to do something to stop that threat, because otherwise that threat could mean the end of your life. It could be the end of your partner's life. And that is a tense, adrenaline-ridden situation where the police officers have to make a very big decision in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, whether or not to return fire or to walk away from the situation. And when you're trapped in an apartment and your buddy is dragging your other buddy out of the apartment because he just got shot, and you have a weapon on your side and there's unknown fire coming from somebody, then the first instinct is to protect yourself and get away. So the protect yourself was shoot. The getaway was avoid what was happening and drag his buddy out and then retreat himself.
Right. And the situation, right? Breonna Taylor, it is sad that she was shot and killed. That is sad because she was not the one firing at the police. Should she have been shot? If it could have been helped, absolutely no. But she was right next to the guy who was her boyfriend, who was shooting at the police. I'm not saying that she was looking to die because she was standing next to him or anything. I'm not saying that, but she was in a bad position where, unfortunately, something was going to happen to her. It's hard to stand right next to a guy who's shooting at a police officer, and the police officer, trying to only hit one person, not the other.
Plus, I believe the cop said that whether or not he actually did or not, I do trust him in this instance. He said that he could not even see Breonna behind him, which makes sense. His body's filled with adrenaline. He just got shot at, and it was in a hallway. So, yeah.
And that is why you have training, so that you can train for situations like that. But in some situations, it is, looking back on it, you can see how things maybe could have gone better, but that could have gone better route is a very small one compared to, or is a very unlikely one compared to all the other terrible or more terrible things that could have happened.
And real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay, yeah. Also, the best case scenario was not any fault of the cops, because the cops have permission to bust into the apartment without giving any reason to the occupants, and they decided to announce their presence anyway. So they already did everything they could to prevent violence, and Kenneth Walker decided to initiate the violence. So, they had their guns holstered, they weren't drawn, they didn't go in there looking for a fight. So, it came down to a person was killed, and it's one of those instances where they, BLM, or whoever it may be, they saw the black, right? It was a black woman that was killed by cops, and they go, oh man, well that's racism right there. And in reality, it wasn't racism. It was crime. It was an instance of an arrest, and her boyfriend was a criminal, a big drug dealer, and the cops were at simultaneous places across the city, so it was a planned and big operation. I think the FBI was also involved in it. We're trying to arrest this man, and then he shot first, and his girlfriend paid the price of his crime, and so now he's serving jail time. But yeah, I mean, there was nothing better the cops could have done. What could have gone better is if Kenneth Walker had kept his gun holstered and realized that there was nothing else he could have done to try and escape from the police.
And the idea that this shooting was in any way racially motivated is just not true. Like we've been talking about, the police were not the ones who opened fire first. If even one of them had been racially motivated and wanted to do harm or kill people just because they were black, then instead of knocking and instead of even even trying to arrest them, that cop would have just started shooting, or would have tried to abuse their power and do various things. And they didn't. They are not the ones that escalated the situation. Kenneth Walker did, and because of that, they had to respond in kind. That is a situation where if you have the ability to shoot back at a bad guy, you almost have to, because otherwise you or someone else is going to get hurt. And
absolutely, they didn't know if he was going to shoot again or not. They just knew that someone just got shot. My buddy's bleeding now from a bullet wound, and someone who I'm now in an apartment that I know is a drug person, and I'm trying to arrest someone, just did it. What's the instinct? Save myself, save my friends, kill the person that, or at least hurt the person that tried to just kill me and my buddies.
Yeah, and were the police acting completely irresponsible or outside of what was expected of them? I think the answer is no. They were being shot at. When you're being shot at, you can't just stand there and say, hey, listen, let's talk about this. Or you have to assess the situation as quickly as possible and make a decision as quickly as possible that will save as many lives and as many people as possible. Because if he had decided to not shoot back, he could have been shot. Other officers could have been shot, or people in neighboring apartments could have been hurt as well, right? That's more of a obscure way to hurt people, because as far as we know, I don't believe anyone else got hurt in this, but they very well could have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's an apartment. Bullets could have gone through walls.
Right. And I think, in my opinion, whether this shooting was justified, the shooting of Breonna Taylor was not justified, but that phrasing in and of itself is wrong, because they did not go there with the intention to shoot her, and they did not intentionally shoot her. Her boyfriend opened fire first, and they responded in kind.
Yep, absolutely. And we do have 3 messages now, so we'll go ahead and listen to some of those and see what everyone's saying.
Yep.
Hey, what's up? Spencer Colson, your favorite deplorable gay Republican here. Tuned into your last show, so definitely excited to see what you guys have to say. Just wanted to chime in and show you guys a little bit of love and support.
Thank you very much. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Could take another message here.
There was nothing better the cops could have done. Yes, it is. If you have a police force that's fucking up, you can't just leave it at the problem and say, oh, there's nothing we can do about the police officers fucking up and raiding the wrong building or raiding the right building, but still fucking up on how.
All right, so we do appreciate we appreciate keeping comments clean. I would have loved to listen to the rest of your response. Please leave a cleaner version of what you were going to talk about if you'd like to add your comment. We just don't appreciate a lot of cussing on our show. We try to keep it appropriate and make it so that everyone can listen, and not just a select few people who don't mind cussing.
Yep, absolutely.
So I wanted to touch on a couple of things that you guys are saying, especially in regards to it not being racially motivated and some of the things that would have been done differently. A lot of people don't realize, but it's important to note that the particular warrant that the officers had was, number one, a no-search warrant. But instead of serving it in that capacity, they did knock several times on the door and they did announce police search warrant. So even though they had the right to just barge in, they tried to take a very diplomatic, professional approach by giving warning to the people in the house. In fact, during his first interview since the incident, the sergeant who had shot Breonna Taylor had indicated the one thing he would have done differently was not announce themselves, was not knock, and actually execute the no-search warrant, which would have prevented her boyfriend from coming to senses and formulating a plan that ultimately resulted.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If they had gone ahead and not knocked, if they had just barged in, Kenneth Walker probably would not have had time to formulate a plan of shooting and grab his gun. Maybe he would have, but he definitely would have had less time to mount a resistance against the police.
Absolutely, that's so true. The more time you give someone to respond, especially someone who's no criminal, the higher the chances are that something could happen. I can't say to the reasoning because I don't think I've heard any straightforward reason that the officers have given for why they decided to announce their presence first. But if you ask me, as far as I can see from all the evidence that I've seen, it seems like they were just trying to avoid a conflict. They were trying to avoid a bad situation and bring out the best possible results because they were going to a place that looked like it was occupied, and they wanted to make sure that no violence happened. So they announced their presence, and what they really did was they gave Kenneth Walker the opportunity to not be violent and to submit peacefully because he was going to get arrested no matter what, and he did in the end. Instead, what happened is that his sin of being a criminal and being a drug dealer resulted in the death of his girlfriend. So, I mean, I would say the cops, I don't think the cops did anything wrong. I think they did everything right in that instance. And I actually believe the same thing for our next example, which is Jacob Blake.
Yeah. And I agree with Colson. I think the police did the best they could, especially in a situation where there was a person who they were not specifically there for. It's unfortunate that she died, but I think the police did the best they could after they had knocked. I have to agree with our favorite deplorable, as he calls himself, that if they had gone ahead and not knocked, if they had gone ahead and barged in, things could have and probably would have turned out differently. But after they knocked, I think they did the best job that they could, considering they were being fired at.
Yep, absolutely. We'll take another message here, and then we'll move on to Jacob Blake.
Yep.
By the way, gentlemen, also couldn't listen without wishing you a belated but happy International Women's Day. Now, you might be asking, why is he wishing us a Women's Day? We're clearly not women. Because in America, you should not assume somebody's gender. You might be one of those few that's questioning and still trying to decide what gender you are. So, happy International Women's Day to you both. Only in America, where you need a uterus to have an opinion on abortion, but not to be legally considered a woman. Hey, I guess men can have periods too. Period.
That was pretty good. That was really
That was good.
Nice job, man.
Happy International Women's Day.
Yep. So yeah, well, next we're going to be moving on to Jacob Blake. I would say his name is probably almost as well known as George Floyd's. He's got the same kind of situation that happened with Breonna Taylor in instance to Kenny, crap, I forgot his name, the boyfriend.
Yeah, Walker.
Is the same kind of, Walker, the same kind of thing that revolves around Jacob Blake. Jacob Blake was, so what happened was there was a domestic disturbance, and it was debated about exactly what was happening inside the house before there was a call made, but there was disturbance, and Blake's sister, Jacob's sister, called 911 and reported that there was stuff, which is debated about what exactly it was, happening at their house. That Blake was being physical and he was being violent. The cops obviously then responded and came to the house. And it was only one officer who responded. There was no partner, so he was solo. And what he did is imagine a small cookie cutter house in kind of a slummy neighborhood. You got like those steps, the concrete steps up the front, and then you got that old crappy screen door, right? Yeah, everyone can picture what I'm talking about there. I've seen it was like 3 or 4 steps or something like that. It had a metal rail on both sides. Okay, so you get this little general picture going on there. The officer approached the steps from looking at the house. He approached them from the left side, and was approaching towards the steps when Blake's sister came out of the house and closed the screen door behind her, or whatever. Maybe it's just some flimsy door, but closed the door behind her, and then stood, and then flattened herself up against the side of the house, and between the house and the door, the edge of the door against the house, and between the other side of the railing, and was talking to him, saying he's in there, stuff like that. And then out of the middle of nowhere, Jacob Blake.
Hey, Cole.
What do you say?
I do have to interrupt you. You're describing actually a different situation from Jacob Blake.
Oh, I am? Did I get those names mixed up?
Yeah. So, Jacob Blake was, he was the guy that was reaching into his car. Does that spark your memory a little bit?
Not as much. You go ahead with that. I'm trying to get my facts straight 1 second here.
Okay. So the Jacob Blake situation, there was a guy named Jacob Blake, and he had already, at the time of the incident, he had a warrant out for his arrest. And he went in his car, I believe, or he somehow got to a house, and he actually had a restraining order from this house and the person inside the house. I don't know if we know the identity of that person. It's been speculated that it was his girlfriend who he had sexually abused, and he broke that restraining order by going to her house. He had a history of being a sex offender and a domestic abuser. In the past, he had already assaulted officers and resisted arrest after pulling a gun in a bar in 2015. So this guy already sort of had a rap sheet on him. He already had some pretty bad stuff, right? Sexual abusers, I don't have any sympathy for them. Pretty bad people in the eyes of society and me. And so in the video that you can watch of Jacob Blake, there were several officers that were trying to detain him. They got him down onto the ground, trying to restrain him. He got up, walked around from the passenger side where he was being restrained to the driver's side of his vehicle, where he then reached into the vehicle and where I believe it was confirmed, but you'll have to look this up. I believe it was confirmed that he had a knife in his car, and that he was saying that he had a knife. The police officers, all the people around him were saying, stop, just, don't resist the officers, don't get your knife, stuff like that. And he went against them. He reached inside his vehicle, and that was when one of the officers shot him. And for those that care, he did survive, so he is still alive. And he was avoiding the police and going around his car, which is kind of a universal sign of, hey, I don't really care what the police are going to do. I'm going to do my own thing. And that situation was terrible for the officer, because if the officer had waited just a little bit longer, he could have very easily had a knife slammed into his face. And that is a situation where the officer had to make the best decision for himself and the people around him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that. Sorry, guys, I got those names mixed up there. The name of the guy that I was thinking about, it was Ricardo Munoz. Sorry, my bad. But yes,
Fine, we cover him too.
I mean, yeah. Munoz, he was another person who was put into martyrdom by BLM, and for the reasons I described. Also, just to finish that story about him, when he busted open the door, and his sister was there, the cop was, I think it was like 10 door. It looked like it was 10 or 15 feet from the door when Muniz burst out of it. And so when Muniz came out bursting from the door, he actually had a knife, and he was trying to jump and attack the cop, and then started sprinting after the officer when he hit the ground, and the officer just turned behind and just got like a barely split-second shot, and boom, fire a shot at Muniz, and then yes, did kill him. Once again, another totally justified shooting.
Yep.
And I don't want anyone looking at me and or saying my Instagram or whatever, saying, how can you justify a shooting? I can justify a shooting when someone's charging at you with a knife and your options are keep running until you tire out and they stab you because he was not in a right frame of mind. I think that they said he was high on several different drugs. But yes, so he was going places, and he was trying to kill the cop. That's his goal. His whole goal was to kill that officer. It's what he wanted. So, that was a justified shooting.
Yeah, and we can talk about that for a little bit before we go back to Jacob Blake. I think that the officer did everything that he should have, and that is even more justified than, I would say, almost any of these that we are going to talk about today. Because that guy was charging at him with a knife, and that officer had to protect his life. His life could have ended very quickly there if he had not fired at that criminal. And
yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing to think that the BLM movement, as a movement, has put on their pedestal of human as martyrs some of the worst people in the United States, right? That guy was a criminal, yet he still got raised to BLM sainthood, so to speak. He got raised as someone who was unjustly killed when every single piece of evidence points towards the opposite.
Yep, absolutely. And going back to Jacob Blake, that was another good instance. He was attempting to get a weapon, and I don't know about you guys, but when you attempt to get a weapon, you're not attempting to grab a knife in at the moment, very tense situation, so where you can walk up and give your cop buddy a big hug and say congratulations for whatever on the back while you're holding a knife. You're not doing that. You're trying to hurt the person. the cops knew that Jacob Blake was going. His next step was to try and hurt them, for however he was going to do that. Whether he was going to charge them with a knife or throw it or whatever it may be, he didn't grab the knife to give them a cuddly, warm hug. He grabbed the knife to hurt them. And so, yeah, I do find it ironic that the BLM movement, which says that it stands for racial equality, keeps picking these really bad people as their martyrs.
Yeah, and talking about Jacob Blake, in no situation that I can think of, or that I think anyone can, if you can think of a reason that he was legitimately reaching into his car for something that would have de-escalated or made the situation better, please tell us, because I can't think of anything. That was not the time to reach in to get a drink of water or to grab your ID or anything remotely nice like that, right? That is not the time. If the police are actively trying to restrain you, you don't get up just to grab, your ID or whatever. And so the only thing in my mind that can come from him reaching into his car is to get some sort of weapon to resist the officers with and to fight against them with.
No, absolutely. And moving on to I would say probably the biggest, our final example, and then we're just going to leave this open to open discussion. George Floyd.
Yep.
So, yep. George Floyd. He was obviously not the starter, but he was the starting fire. Because individuals across the country saw this man had just been killed. They didn't understand why he had been killed. And then obviously evidence did take a while to become public, so that way people could actually find out information and understand what was really going on. George Floyd was an ex-football player, but he is also a criminal. And at the moment of his arrest, which everyone will find various information on depending on what source you use to base your evidence off of. He was being violent, and he was drunk. He was causing disturbances. He was on. I remember what it was. The after action police report said that he had been on so many. The autopsy, I guess, said that he had been on so many drugs that he would have been dead by the end of night, whether or not the officers had tried to intervene. And ended up killing him.
If they had found him dead, they would have said it was an overdose, and that is exactly what the autopsy shows. It does not show that he was directly killed by any action on the police officers.
Yeah, absolutely. So George Floyd, he was resisting arrest and attempting to get away from the officers. He did, he gestured in wrong ways, and in the end, we're all aware of the "I can't breathe" statement. And that is an instance where I completely disagree with the cops' actions, because at that moment in time, after you are now arresting someone, your adrenaline is going down because there's no longer any risk or any action was really going on. His adrenaline was going down. The officer was thinking more clearly, and that's when a moment when he should have taken a second to look at him then kneeling on George Floyd's neck and say, okay, actually, wait a second, this is not what I should be doing in order to arrest this man, and then taking a step back and let him breathe, and done other instances. And then later, obviously, Floyd would have died of a drug overdose, but then it would not have been the officer's fault. So I do disagree with the whole kneeling on the man's neck for, was it 5-10 minutes?
Something like that.
Yeah. It
but,
varies depending on what news source you look at.
Yeah, but the actions of that police officer kneeling on his neck did not cause him loss of breathing, as far as we can tell. If the easiest way to deduce that is if he can repeatedly say, "I can't breathe," he can breathe. If he is able to repeatedly say that, right? He doesn't just say it once and then passes out from lack of oxygen. Then
otherwise it would have
he's
been
able to breathe.
Otherwise it would have come out. If he really couldn't breathe, he might have been able to get a sentence out the first time. And even then, he did say it after a little bit, after the cop had been kneeling on him. But then repeatedly afterwards, it would have been like, I can't, trying to speak, but not being able to get the air to do so.
And
it's theorized that it was a combination of overdose and then a lack of oxygen, but not a cutoff of oxygen that led to his death.
Well, and if you watch the full extended clip, I believe it's from the one of the police officers' body cams. The whole situation, right? The reason that the police were there in the first place is that I believe Floyd tried to pass a $20 bill that was fake. It was something related to that. And so the police showed up. He had a lot of drugs with him. And obviously, the police are the type of people that don't really appreciate you carrying around a bunch of drugs. So he took a lot of them to avoid the police discovering them, charging him with possession or anything like that. And watching the body cam footage from the cops, you can see that before they even try to put him in the car, he says, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And that's not a situation of, right at this point, he is standing, basically freestanding. No one's barely touching him, definitely not his neck or his lungs. And he's already saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." That is a situation where I can't breathe means that I can't breathe because of all these drugs that I just took are affecting my ability to think I can breathe or to do various other things. So if you watch the body cam footage, the "I can't breathe" statement came before the officer was even kneeling on his neck. And I believe that the officer kneeling on his neck and that whole situation comes down to bad training on the part of the police department. The police did not train their officers properly in order to diffuse and to de-escalate situations properly, and that is part of what led to him kneeling on his neck. But that is not what caused George Floyd's death, and that, as far as we can tell, was not intentional. Especially, it was not intentional murder. It may be. I believe the officer is now being charged with manslaughter, but I do not believe that he is being charged, or even could realistically be charged with murder.
Yeah, there's been a lot of controversy around his trial, and it's been delayed repeatedly. And currently, it's the looking through my notes here, it's really, there's no current there's no current action taken on it. There is information such as they're charging other officers involved in the incident, but there has been no results yet. I got sources here from NPR, Washington Post, ABC, and New York Times, and 100 other different places. There's no current actual results of the trial, but there is just saying that yes, this officer is being tried, and I completely disagree with the officer's actions. And I also believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the officer, I saw it, but I didn't see any evidence continuing off of it. That the officer was proven to be, I don't think it was unstable. What he was like, he was or violent. It was just he wasn't normal, a normal officer. I believe he had a past of overreacting or something like that. But like I said, there's been no real evidence to that, so take that with a grain of salt, however everybody wants to take it. But yeah, so let me know you guys' opinions on that real quick, because we actually have to end a little bit early today, here in about 9 minutes. So sorry for you guys that are getting in right now.
But
It's
leave
kind of
comments.
bad timing. I'm sorry. Yeah. But yeah, leave comments, because we can spend this last 9 minutes talking about what's really going on here. Give us your opinions on BLM or some of the causes, the murders, and people that have been turned into the martyrs for the movement. How many of these instances, such as uh, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, Ricardo Munoz, how many of these instances were justified killings, and how many of them were unjustified, or what was wrong that happened inside of them, or is it kind of a lot of gray area and no one really knows what's going on? So leave your comments, guys. And if you don't get in this episode, leave it in the next one, because we're always open to talking about everything.
Yeah, and as a kind of plug for our next couple episodes, the next episode that we're looking at doing is going to tie directly into this. We've been talking about how the police officer was not trained properly and how people have been calling for defunding the police. So our next episode, we're going to be talking about police reform and what should be done in that arena, if anything should be done in it. And there's a message. We'll take that, and then we can take more messages if you guys have it, and then kind of give you guys our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. We got 8 more minutes. We're gonna try to pack it off.
Hey guys, I just came in, so it's kind of bummer that you guys are ending the show. I read your title and I was like, okay, this is something that I can get behind. First of all, I'm not from the U.S. I live in Canada, but as you can see, of course, I'm a black person, so I am very aware of what my black constituents or whatever, or my people like in the U.S. are going through every day. So you know, I'm glad that you guys are really standing up to it, and I support everybody that does this. And I'm gonna follow you guys. So if you do the show again, I'm definitely gonna tune in.
Hey, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, and feel free
and
to go back and watch this once we are done doing it live, because we brought up a lot of good stuff. We actually had some good comments earlier.
yeah, we talked about Ricardo Munoz, Jacob Blake, and first off, we talked about Breonna Taylor. So yeah, good examples. And thank you. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we like to do this. We saw a lot of, we got really good guys, and especially with individuals like Rush Limbaugh, R.I.P. And we said we miss him. But we got individuals like that who had these talk shows, and we saw a lot of. They were doing a good job bringing attention to things that were happening in the U.S. or sometimes in other countries, yada yada yada, and they were doing a great job bringing attention to it. And especially in the last year, we've seen a lot of news organizations doing a lot of censoring, a lot of repression of information, and it's made it hard to get some of the facts. And me and Spencer here, we are call us an in-between, kind of a gray area, because we like to talk a lot about facts, but we also have opinions. Sometimes they're very strong opinions. And I mean, everyone has opinions. So I hear all the time people, with talk shows or in the news or anything, we need to keep opinions out of it. And if a news organization is going to dedicate, an hour or whatever amount of time into something that is not titled with an opinion, then they need to indicate that, because otherwise people accept it as fact, or people can be perceived as accepting it as fact. But me and Spencer have opinions. I mean, everyone has opinions, and so we have facts to back up what we're saying. We admit we were wrong, and we just enjoy bringing attention to some of these instances happening in the world, especially in the U.S., that are that are really controversial or being talked about a lot, or sometimes there's not a lot of information about them. So especially with this Martyrs of the BLM movement episode we're doing today, this is probably one of those controversial topics we could be talking about right now. Because there's some people who would look at us and just go, oh man, they're just absolute racists, or they're haters, they're horrible human beings. And in response, me and Spencer are like, actually, if you guys were to listen, then you would see that we really aren't being like that. We accept that there was people who did wrong things. For instance, the officer should not have kneeled on Jacob Blake's neck. And that's something that we can debate, we can have a conversation about. So yeah, thank you, Rugged, for talking to us today, and thank you for the follow. Yeah, follow your back. Man, we got another message. Perfect timing.
Yep.
Go ahead and take that.
Absolutely, bro. First of all, no matter how hard they try to make it like, black and white or us versus them, it will never work, because like as human beings, like if you live in this world, people will surprise you, right? And nobody in their right mind, or anybody who has a functioning brain, can be just on one side and say, okay, I'm for black people, or I'm for white people. It's about good and bad, and there's good people and bad people everywhere. But there's culturally also, there's a lot of things wrong in the US culturally, because the way that it was built was wrong. And there's not only black people are suffering there, but a lot of white people also are suffering there. So it affects people differently, you know.
Yeah,
thank you for your observation.
Yeah, your first part there was a good point. I think that's kind of one of the things that we maybe didn't explicitly state today, but one of the things that we were definitely talking about kind of in what we were saying is that we don't see these instances as white on black or black on white. We see these instances as good versus bad, or as an improperly handled situation or a properly handled situation. We don't see it based on race, because race is something that is literally skin deep, whereas BLM, the movement, does see these as race based and filled with racism, just because of the color of the skin of the people that are involved.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned right there at the end, the U.S. was founded wrong. I personally believe that the founders of the Constitution, I think the Constitution itself is perfect. I think it's some of the twists or the people trying to change its meaning that has actually led to more issues than the Constitution itself. And I mean, at the beginning of the Constitution, yes, there was still slavery, but it was implied in it that there was supposed to be less, or supposed to be not at all, and so it left it open for the future to change that. And so that's kind of, I guess it's kind of a different conversation. But yes, thank you very much for your comment. We enjoyed talking about this stuff, because everything isn't specific to white or black or to everything like that. So a conservative doesn't focus on white, or a conservative might not only focus on white, but focus on black too, and talk about things, because in reality we're all people. And like Spencer said, race is just skin deep. In the U.S., I do have to agree with one of these things you said, that some of our culture is messed up, and I do believe in that. I personally believe that Hollywood plays a big part of that, because in companies that do a lot of advertising and stuff like that, because they push information or ideals in front of our head. Like for instance, how many crime movies can you watch, right, happening in, I don't know, like Los Angeles or Vegas, or happening in New Orleans or crap like that. And what you constantly see with, for instance, gangs and drugs, is you see black people, right, all the time. Like, that doesn't create a good image for black people. It's obviously not true. Black people are not overly drug dealers or gang members or crap like that. So it's a messed up metric that is being pushed. Not, I wouldn't say it's being pushed for racism, but it might be, but I'm not going to say that. But it's pushing an idea inadvertently and creating an image that people just keep in their minds, and then that creates other issues. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about that. And we can even mention that in a different episode, talk about things like Hollywood and how they're creating, how they're creating instances by portraying one thing or another.
Yeah. And go back to our episode where we talked about the Constitution to get kind of more of our thoughts.
Yeah.
Do you want to play these
Real quick.
messages?
Yeah, we can take this real quick, and then I actually have to go. I'm sorry, I'm going to be the killer today, guys, but we'll take these last two messages and try to answer them real quick.
So when black people are murdering innocent black when police are murdering innocent black people, then you have white people dying of mass shooting every day, and they're not doing anything about that either.
Yeah, I mean, talking about cops and whether they predominantly attack black people or whether they don't, the statistics do show that far more white people die, and just as in relatable on scale, because obviously there are less black people than there are white people, but scaling it for population, more white people are killed by cops through whatever than there are black people killed by cops. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, so you've got some information to think about there. That's something that people can think about. One more message here, guys, and then we're gonna have to go ahead and end for today.
Yep.
And also, thank you, Cole and Spencer. What I meant by a lot of things that culturally wrong is like I've been to a lot of places in the world, right? I used to live in Europe before, and now I live in Canada. So there's a lot of things that are not normal here, and also are not tolerated here in the real world that happens in the U.S. And it's so messed up, like this crazy gun situation where everybody has gun in the U.S. and nobody can say shit. People will get angry, and then they're surprised why everybody's killing each other over there. And normally in Canada right now, I live in Ottawa, the capital. Like nobody carries guns, so you don't even see like any like any kind of a gun problem or anything like that. But you cannot tell that to anybody in the U.S. They will think that you're taking away their right or whatever. But then the murder rate is high, the mass shootings are high, the police are killing people. So that's what I mean by culture.
So, again, I'd refer you back to our episode on the Second Amendment. Generally, you are right. Americans, me and Colson included, believe that if you take our guns away, that's an infringement on our rights. That's not what we're really talking about today, though. Today is the quote-unquote martyrs of BLM, and I think my general thoughts on that is that all in one way or another, all of the martyrs, all of the people that BLM as an organization propped up as their heroes or their martyrs, they're rallying around them. In one way or another, each situation was not a situation where they should have been rallying around this person. George Floyd was taking drugs, and Jacob Blake was a sex offender, and Breonna Taylor, yes, she was not the person that should have been shot, but her boyfriend was there, and he was shooting at the police at the beginning. So I think that whichever way you look at it, almost all, if not all, of the martyrs that BLM has put up and let riots happen over were not people that should have been martyrs in one sense of the word or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, shout out to Truth Hurts 2K. You just give me a follow, man, and I love your bio. He says,
"Oh yeah,
yeah, he says, no race, no religions, no gender suffers more or less than any other. Knowing that we can talk as equals. Thank you, man, for putting that and being part of the of creating equality. So yeah, on that note, I think we're really good to go ahead and end today. We just did get a message from Rugged. I'm sorry, man. I actually really do have to go. So I'd love to take your message again another time. So I apologize if we can't right now.
yeah, come back to the next show.
Yes, please come back to the next show. And I'll gladly take whatever you're. I'm sorry. I'll gladly take whatever you're saying so we can listen to it then. So we do have to end for today, guys. And thank you to you guys for leaving your messages and talking about this at
Yep.
a later episode. If you guys want to come to the next one and tell us, we might do maybe talk about this more in depth and do maybe a longer period on it or whatnot. Didn't have the highest attendance today, so if you guys are interested in doing it again, then let us know. But yeah, and also you can message me on my Instagram, and I'll see what you guys are saying to me there. But yeah, go ahead and ending up for today. My name is Colson.
My name is Spencer. We're 18 and American.
And we're signing off. Everyone, thank you for coming today. Please come
Thanks
again
for
to our
coming.
next episode. We'll be talking on Tuesday, I believe, is our next episode. So, yes, thank you so much, guys.
Yeah. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, guys. See you guys later.
See ya.